Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries podcast. This is an RPGaDay recording. We're recording for day 7. The word for today is familiar. I'm joined by my lovely wife Hannah, and we're going to chat a little bit about the old favourite of some people, wizards familiars in D&D and such like. So, I suppose I first remember familiars really from sort of D&D 3.5. I don't really recall them being a thing before then.
They definitely were. I vaguely remember that I had a ranger character in the high school D&D game who got very upset when his wolf got killed.
Was that like AD&D or?
AD&D, second ed.
See, although I've got some of the books for it, I never really played AD&D second ed as much as you did yourself, so perhaps I sort of missed out on that. I played a bit of basic D&D, and I don't really remember it being like such a big thing in basic D&D.
There were definitely animal companions of various types in the second ed game. I think the wizard, the druid and the ranger could all get them and use them like within the game.
I remember it mainly from 3.5, and I think that was because, if I remember correctly, in 3.5, depending on what familiar you took, you got like a small benefit based on what type of familiar it was. I can't remember what the benefits were.
I would have to look up what the game effects were in the second ed, to be honest.
Well, because I'll grab my 3.5 and we see what it says in it. Okay, here we go. So, let's blow a bit of dust off this and let's have a look, see what we get. Familiars. See what it's like in the. I can't remember what the index is like in terms of quality in 3.5.
It's better than the equivalent Time World of Darkness books.
Well, yeah, but so are most books, to be perfectly honest. Although they have improved that over the years, so I can't grumble too much. Right, okay. So, 3.5, you could have either the bat, you got a +3 on listen check. A cat, you got +3 on move silently. Hawk, you got a +3 on spot checks in bright light. Lizard, you got +3 on climb checks. Owl, you got +3 on spot checks, but only when in shadows. Ooh. Rat, you got +2 on fortitude saves, and that's pretty cool. Raven, you gain +3 on appraise checks, and the Raven community can speak a language of its master's choice. You got a snake, which is like a tiny viper, which gave you a +3 bonus on bluff. A toad, which gave you +3 hit points, or a weasel, which gave you +2 on reflex saves. Now, I've got to admit, I don't really remember ever having picked one of these familiars, particularly for the bonus it gives you, because don't get me wrong, +3 to a skill check at 3.5 is nice, but I always picked the familiar because I was like, oh, what would be cool that I'd like to have? So obviously the Raven, we've all seen the film The Crow. Who hasn't wanted to have a familiar that's a crow? And likewise an owl. Anything that was stereotypically wizardy, I was all over. But I can see you've dug out the old AD&D players.
I've dug out the second ed one, and what I remember as being being able to get an actual ability from a creature, I think, is more use of your animal lore and animal training and animal empathy abilities
rather than actual familiar.
But obviously this book is a little bit harder to navigate than that one, and it's been 2 decades, so rather than waste time on that.
Well, we were talking a bit before we started about why it is we think that the familiar as a concept, why we think it appeals to someone. Do you think it's just because it's a stereotypical wizardy thing, or do you think there's something else behind it?
I think there's definitely a factor of people that want cute animals in their stories for whatever reason, like to go for the familiars characters, and I think there's got to be a certain sort of understanding with the GM as to how far you can push it with a familiar character, because people do get very attached to them, and it's not like your normal red shirt NPC that you can just kill off in the first 5 minutes to make a point. It's the player's character's pet, and players think of it to some level as their own pet as well within the story.
Yeah, I think that is part of it. I mean, for me though, I always think it's cool if you have your background for your character, and there's like an NPC in it, like probably a family member or like an NPC. You get to interact with a lot, so it allows you to like develop your character and a bit of banter with them. Whereas I always thought of the familiar as like it's like having a tiny little NPC sort of in your pocket almost as you're sort of walking around, because obviously familiars tend to be more than sort of like your basic animal. They tend to be intelligent to a certain degree. But you get a bit more leeway as the wizard to like play the familiar yourself, so you can almost have those conversations sort of with yourself to develop like the character and point at aspects of the character. But it's also something you can do like in like quiet moments. So like if there's something going on and like you're really not involved, you and like other people, you can like, have a conversation with your familiar and stuff like that, and you can just use it to sort of build up your character a little bit.
So while we're on this, what different kinds of familiars could you have if you couldn't have any of those in that book? And I'm thinking of like robot familiar in a sci-fi game.
I'd get a pig familiar, definitely.
A pig?
Yeah, definitely, man. Or like a boar or something. Probably not a boar, because they're like quite tasty when it comes to like D&D. But
yeah, they make nice bacon.
In both ways of the words. But certainly they're nasty in combat. But like a pig or something. Because like, look at this way. I mean, I think you could do like quite an interesting story. Because obviously, as we know, like in real life, like pigs are good for getting rid of like scraps and stuff like that.
Yep.
So you can always like you don't have to spend a lot to feed them, because like whatever scraps you've got left out of your provisions, you can feed them to there. If you have a more murderous persuasion, there goes the dead body. The pig's taken care of it. So effectively, you've just got like a sort of NPC walking dustbin with you, who can like eat any evidence that you want to get rid of. So that's quite handy if you're for more nefarious persuasion. How about you? Which thing you go for?
I think my favourite one that I've had with a previous character, I play a lot of various different Catgirl characters because it amuses me.
It's a sickness. We're trying to get some medication for it.
I played a Catgirl who had a little red dot that would occasionally turn up, and if I could catch it, it'd go and do a favour for me. And it wasn't strictly like a familiar, but it sort of had that sort of function to it. And I'd occasionally have a conversation with the little red dot within the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's one of the cool things about a familiar. Like I say, it allows you to build on and develop your character concept, but in a way that's not like intrusive to the game. Because let's face it, no one likes it when you get into a tense scene and someone suddenly breaks out into a massive monologue about like the character's like tragic backstory and their father's sword that they were given and whatever. But if you're like a bit of a quirky wizard and you're like talking to your familiar, or like you're having your familiar interact with people, for some reason that doesn't. And like I say, most people like animals to some degree. It doesn't seem quite as intrusive as if you're suddenly like, I am the sorcerer, blah, 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 and here is my background.
True.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's nice to see them interacting with the other characters in the game as well. I vaguely remember a D&D game quite some time ago where I think it was your character spent quite a lot of time giving the mage's character, or rather giving the mage's characters familiars scraps, so that they'd side with you if it ever came to it in a fight.
That's right. But I mean, like I said, I think it's cool as well, because it's like if you're playing like a mage with a familiar and like you're sort of playing of it, you've almost effectively got like 1.5 characters. So there's like certain thing. It gives you like a chance to have a little bit of a change of pace from your main character without the ball ache of like having a whole second character you have to play. Because obviously familiars tend to like reflect the mage they're sort of with a bit, but it allows you to, like, if you've got like you could have quite a serious mage, but if you've got like a mischievous like fox as a familiar, if you fancy like, oh yeah, I've been all mysterious and serious and sort of arcane all session, you can then have a bit of a break from that. You get a few like cheeky mischievous things like your fox is up to, and then you can like go back to your normal character. And as long as you're not, like say, disrupting the game, I think that's a good thing, because it gives you like a bit of a break and a little bit of a change of pace.
True.
Okay, well, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about familiars, love. I think that pretty much wraps up that. So we will be back shortly with episode 8 for RPGaDay, which is Obscure. So we'll see you then. Take care.